Good afternoon, Nairobi. Linking force and people is a powerful idea. It was only almost exactly 3 months ago, on a Monday morning in Ottawa, the capital city of Canada, my country. An Indigenous group of people, publicly known as the Grand Council of the Crees, have offices in Ottawa, where they deal with some political matters and some policy and technical matters. They represent about 18,000 Cree people that live in 9 communities scattered throughout a vast territory. A territory, in fact, so vast, it's about 3/4 the size of Kenya. It's 450,000 square kilometers, 18,000 people, if you can imagine. Isaac Voyageur is his name, and he was in his office that Monday morning. Some of you actually may recall these Cree people. It was about 20 to 25 years ago that the government of Quebec, a province in Canada, had a plan. Their plan was to develop the largest hydro development power project in the world. A plan, if it had succeeded, would have built 30 huge dams, 600 dikes, and irreversibly affected a watershed the size of the country of France. The Crees had another plan because they realized that if this mega development went ahead, their culture could not survive. Their culture was dependent on thousands of years of being hunters in the intact, ecologically intact boreal wilderness of northern Canada. So they had another plan. The Grand Chief at that time, whose name was, or is, Matthew Kuncombe, and I could not have invented these names, Isaac Voyageur, Matthew Kuncombe. He was the Grand Chief at that time. And he developed a plan to counter the government's plan. He invited his elders to take a canoe trip. A canoe trip from James Bay in northern Canada, through Canadian rivers, across into the United States, and onto the famous Hudson River, a river that's famous because it flows into New York City. And they canoed down the Hudson River, landed in New York City, and held a press conference that grabbed the world's attention. There was such an enormous public outcry worldwide that the state of New York immediately canceled its contracts with Hydro-Quebec. Subsequently, the Supreme Court in Canada ruled that there could be no exports of mega hydro projects power to foreign countries without a rigorous environmental impact assessment. And the third victory the Crees had was the Premier of Quebec at that time suspended the entire project. These are a people who have empowered themselves. And being empowered is the context of the rest of this Cree story. This is my granddaughter, Olivia, and she has emboldened on her toque, or hat, toque we call it in Canada, Cree letters. And these Cree letters stand for Iuischi, which in the Cree language means the people's land. Isaac Voyageur, in his office that Monday morning, is a member of the Iuischi, a member of the people's land. That morning, he opened his email, as he does every morning when he gets into work, and he received his first Global Forest Watch alert. What this was it told him where in his entire territory of the Crees there had been human activity as recorded by Global Forest Watch via satellites transmitted to a processing center to detect forest change in his territory. He saw there was 5 bright red spots on the satellite map that was attached to the Global Forest Watch alert email. He zoomed into those 5 bright red spots, and indeed on a satellite map, and indeed it looked like clear-cut logging. 3 of those 5 sites were actually in his family's traditional trapline. two of the sites were in an adjacent trapline. Now, traplines are an interesting phenomena in northern Canada amongst Indigenous people. Isaac Voyageur and his family have held this trapline for hundreds and hundreds of years and has passed down from generation to generation. His trapline, his family's trapline, is 3,800 square kilometers, one family. And there are 150 Cree families that have or basically own similar-sized traplines. A third of the world's countries are smaller than Isaac's trapline. Every year, he spends 1 to 3 months on his trapline, basically reconnect with his culture, and he traps. On that Monday morning, he received his email alert, verified that it was indeed clear-cut logging, and he phoned his Cree partner, who was in the vicinity in the area, and he said, "We've got activity, 4937 north, 7937 west latitude. Go check it out." Then he notified the appropriate government authorities, and he waited. 4 hours later, his Cree partner got back to him. He said, "Confirmed, it's illegal logging." He said, "I used my smartphone. I digitally tagged photographs of the clear cuts. I sent them to you, Isaac, and I sent them to the Global Forest Watch website, where they're immediately distributed as an alert to the world." In this instance, the activity of clear-cut logging, illegal logging, was stopped, and the effort to save the intact boreal forest within these trap lines within the Cree territory was started, and it was successful. This is the idea we are building: to monitor the world's forests in near real time, to detect forest change, to communicate that information to people on the ground who care about forests and are capable of taking action. This is the idea we are building. And when I say we, when I say Global Forest Watch, it is actually a partnership, a growing partnership of organizations who are building the system. They include, for example, Google Earth Engine, who provide the computer powerhouse, World Resources Institute, who provide the facilitation, United Nations Environment Program, UNEP, the Center for Global Development, FORMA, and the University of Massachusetts, who write the complicated computer algorithms, who can process and analyze all this satellite data and pump it out in near real time. This is a revolution that will help the fight against deforestation and forest degradation. What we are building, the idea we are building, is we are mobilizing the convergence in advances of technologies. These technologies include the inexpensive availability of satellite imagery at high resolution. NASA is providing the satellite imagery for free. We are mobilizing the technology of very high-speed internet connectivity, which is spreading throughout the world. We are mobilizing social networks. We are mobilizing cloud computing and crowdsourcing. These are the technologies we are mobilizing to link forests and people. By doing so, we are sure that this will create transparency. No government or company can hide. We will know what is happening in the forests of the world through satellites, and we'll be communicating that forest change data to interested publics. This will empower communities, whether they be communities of collections of people who live together in a village or town in a forest environment, or whether they be communities of self-organized people through the internet who might live scattered throughout the world. They might and will likely live in the megacities of the future where more than half the human population will live in a decade or two. So we are linking force and people. This is our idea. It is powerful. And there are 3 fundamental reasons why we are doing this. 1, forests are important. 2, forests are threatened. And 3, because we can. We can now do this based on the technology we now have. It is very difficult to put in a few words why forests are important. They are so important in all our daily lives, whether we live in a village or whether we live in a noisy, busy, concrete city. When you got up this morning, did you read a newspaper? Did you make out a shopping list, write a check? Did you walk on your wooden floor, open a wooden cabinet, sit in your wooden furniture? Did you use a tissue in the washroom? Did you use a cosmetic, a medicine, or a detergent, many of which are comprised of forest products? It is difficult to put into words how important forests are. But they are important not just for our utilitarian human values and to meet our immediate needs, but they are important for important species around the world. And I'm going to tell you about one of those species that you may not have heard of. This is a Google Earth image of the west coast of North America. The yellow square points to actually surrounds Princess Island on the west coast of Canada. Let's zoom in a bit. You can see the famous Haida archipelago off the west coast, almost 400 kilometers in length. You can see the snow-capped coastal mountains with glaciers, and you can see all the green forests on the coast. And we're going to zoom in again to Princess Island. If we could zoom in at sufficiently high resolution, we might be lucky enough to see this critter. The famous Kermode bear, or is more well known to the indigenous peoples of the west coast of Canada, the great spirit bear. He's eating a salmon, just finished the head, and is working his way through the body. He depends to fatten up every year on the salmon-bearing streams at which millions of salmon migrate. There are only about 400 to 1,000 of these animals, and they owe their existence to the protective traditions of the indigenous people. They never killed or hunted these great spirit bears. They never told the white hunters and fur trappers about these bears. They protected them. They're not an albino. They're not a weird relative of the northern polar bear who lost their way in the wilderness. They're actually a genetic variant of the common black bear. Can anybody, I gave you enough hints, make a wild guess at why there are so many of these great spirit bears on the west coast here? Scientists have found that from a fish's perspective, under the water, they can't see a white bear as well as they can see a black bear. Makes sense, doesn't it? In fact, the white spirit bears are 30% more efficient at catching salmon than the normal black bear. These bears depend on this special forest with these fast-flowing, clean streams that contain the migrating salmon for their survival. These forests contain the bear's habitat. They are important, just as forests all over the world are important. They regulate the water cycle. They help ameliorate global warming. They prevent soil erosion. Despite the fact of how important forests are to our daily lives and to species around the world, we are losing them. Over the last 50 years, about half of the world's original forests have been lost or degraded. And with that loss is not just trees, but is species and ecosystems. One of the main reasons why we are losing forests is due to unsustainable logging. And one of the main reasons we have unsustainable logging is because we have severe forest data challenges. The data is incomparable across governments and companies. It is inaccessible. It is too technical. It is too expensive. People don't understand it. They can't communicate and interact with it. No longer. This is the idea we are building. To monitor from space, take real pictures in near real time of what's happening to our forests at 30-meter or better resolution in near real time and communicate that change, that forest change, to people who are interested. When our bodies have a health issue, we use the latest medical advances to either help prevent health problems. In this case, ultrasound in a womb. This is my granddaughter, Madeline. Isn't she beautiful? Similar with satellite technology. Different spectral bands, different resolutions. We are able to monitor and detect forest health problems, forest change issues. Satellites, like my third daughter, Iris, with her eyeglasses. Satellites are our eyeglasses. They are the non-intrusive technology that we will use to monitor the world's forests. If you want to help, here's what you can do. You can, as soon as we launch this initiative in a few months, you can log on, draw with your mouse the area of forest of interest to you, and take action if you get a Global Forest Watch alert. Or you can simply monitor how we're doing and tell us if there's any kinks. You can tell forest buyers and suppliers whether they're meeting their commitments with verifiable data. So there are many things you can do. You might tell that this talk is dedicated to my three granddaughters, my most favorite forest watchers, Olivia, Madeline, and Iris. Thank you.